Two-part episodes are a very common thing in TV shows, and Avatar is no exception. We had a few in seasons 1 and 3, like the Winter Solstice episodes, the Siege of the North, the Day of Black Sun, and of course the finale was a 4-part episode. But there are 2 episodes from the first season that aren't considered a 2-part episode, but I think really should be. These 2 episodes are season 1, episodes 12 and 13, The Storm and The Blue Spirit. These 2 episodes, in my opinion, work super well when watched back to back and treated like a 2-part episode, and I will explain why in this video. We're going back to our roots this week with a classic Avatar video essay, so smash that like button, let's get weird, let's get wild, and let's get right into it. To know why these episodes work so well together, more so than any other 2 consecutive episodes in the series, we need to figure out what works about these episodes on an individual basis. Let's start with season 1, episode 12, The Storm. In this episode, Aang is made upset by a fisherman yelling at him, telling him that he turned his back on the world when it needed him, playing on his pre-existing insecurities, causing Aang to run away, and Katara follows to console him. A storm comes through, locking the 2 in a cave to wait it out, where Aang tells Katara his backstory about his time with the monks before freezing himself in the iceberg. It starts when Aang first learns that he is the Avatar, and after learning about that fact, the other airbenders start treating him differently. The other kids don't want to play with him, and the Airbender Council wants to send him away to finish his training, leading to Aang running away and eventually freezing himself in the iceberg, which ironically also happened during a storm. This backstory shows us that Aang had negative thoughts and memories associated with being the Avatar, which gives context to this line from episode 2.
Why didn't you tell us you were the Avatar? Because I never wanted to be.
The episode also gives us further insight into how Aang feels about the genocide of his people, believing that if he hadn't run away, then he could have been there to help and maybe the air nomads wouldn't have all been killed. This episode shows us that Aang is not a perfect hero, that he makes mistakes and that he's just as flawed and has just as much baggage as anyone else. Meanwhile, Zuko lashes out against his crew, claiming their safety doesn't matter, and later that night, Iroh tells the crew Zuko's backstory in an attempt to get them to understand why he is the way that he is. When Zuko was 14, he went to a war meeting in an attempt to learn about being a good leader. After a general details his plan of sacrificing unsuspecting Fire Nation soldiers, Zuko spoke out of turn against him, resulting in punishment via an Agni Kai. When Zuko gets to this Agni Kai, however, he finds that his opponent is not the war general he spoke out against, but his own father, Fire Lord Ozai. Zuko refuses to fight, but Ozai wanted to teach him a lesson, giving him the scar on his face and banishing him on a seemingly pointless quest to capture the Avatar to regain his honor that he lost by not fighting. This backstory reveals to us that Zuko isn't just some evil brute in exile, but instead that he's a guy who just wants his father and his nation to accept him, and the only way he thinks to go about gaining this is to capture the Avatar through any means necessary, and years of frustration from not finding him resulted in who he was in the first season. These 2 stories tell us that Aang is a flawed person despite being the hero, while Zuko isn't completely evil despite being the villain of most of the first season. The episode culminates in Aang using the same technique he used to freeze himself the first time, but instead he uses it to save his friends. And Zuko shows great selflessness towards his crew members by saving their lives with the help of the lieutenant he insulted at the start of the episode, showing that he does have a heart. The only interaction that Aang and Zuko have in the episode is at the end, where the 2 lock eyes in the Eye of the Storm. I personally believe that this locking of the eyes here is meant to represent that Aang and Zuko aren't all that different. Both have made mistakes that led them to where they are now, and their current actions are attempts to redeem themselves. I think episodes like these are why a ton of people claim that Zuko is the second protagonist, since he gets just as much screen time as Aang does, and a ton of focus is put on his character development in this episode specifically. Keep this theme in mind because it's going to be important to connect this episode with the next one, Season 1, Episode 13, The Blue Spirit. This episode connects to the previous one in a more direct way via the premise of the episode. Aang leaves camp to get medicine for Sokka and Katara, who are both sick from being in the storm from the previous episode. That's a nice little continuity nod, but it goes a little deeper than that. When Aang leaves to get medicine, he is captured by Admiral Zhao, but is rescued by a mute mystery man in a mask depicting a blue spirit. The 2 work together to escape Zhao's compound, and they eventually do, until the blue spirit is shot unconscious. Aang takes off his mask, only to find that it was Zuko who was helping him escape this entire time. Instead of leaving his enemy there to die, Aang brought Zuko to safety. Here's where we start to get into why I think these 2 episodes go great together. It's because the blue spirit plays on the idea established by the storm that Aang and Zuko aren't all that different. Just the premise of the blue spirit alone is enough here, with Aang and Zuko working together for the first time despite only knowing each other as enemies. Zuko knew he was helping Aang escape, and though it's obviously with intent to capture him, Zuko does show a bit of hesitation in attacking Aang when he wakes up, showing that he at least considered what Aang was saying. Aang obviously didn't know it was Zuko who was under the mask until after they escaped, but even when he does find out, he still helps him in return by not letting Zhao get him. However, there's a scene at the end of the episode where Aang says this.
You know what the worst part about being born over 100 years ago is? I miss all the friends I used to hang out with. Before the war started, I used to always visit my friend Kuzan. The 2 of us, we get in and out of so much trouble together. He was one of the best friends I ever had. And he was from the Fire Nation, just like you. If we knew each other back then, do you think we could have been friends too?
This scene not only plays on what we've been talking about, the idea that the two aren't all that different, but it's also a clever bit of foreshadowing where Zuko eventually joins the gang. In fact, there's a major connection to be made between the Blue Spirit persona and Zuko's eventual change of heart near the end of the series, and this is made clear in his first appearance. In the two major instances where Zuko dons the Blue Spirit persona, he ends up helping Aang in some way, despite his goals being more nefarious. The first time is obviously in this episode, but later in the series Zuko wears the mask yet again, this time to free Appa. Both of these instances were beneficial to Aang, but Zuko did those things out of desire to capture him, not to help him. The Blue Spirit persona represents Zuko's inner conflict between doing what he knows is right or wrong to achieve his goals. When Zuko wears the mask, he typically does some dishonorable things to regain his honor and to differentiate those dishonorable actions from himself. For instance, in the Blue Spirit episode, Zuko straight up betrays the very nation he's fighting for in order to capture Aang. He did a dishonorable thing for an honorable reason, but he didn't do that dishonorable act as Zuko, he did it under a different identity. He knows what he's doing is wrong, so he wears a disguise to separate the actions from himself. Logistically speaking, that makes perfect sense. You wouldn't want a crime associated with your name, but one could argue that when Zuko becomes the Blue Spirit, he becomes the Blue Spirit. As in, when he wears the mask, it's not him under there. The Blue Spirit is like a separate personality to Zuko. Another way this episode thematically connects to the Storm is seen in the very beginning of the episode before Zuko puts on the mask. Both the Storm and the Blue Spirit do a great job at humanizing Zuko by showing us that he's more than just evil for the sake of it, which is something that we hadn't seen much of until this point. There have been points as early as the third episode where we see Zuko as more than just an angry brute, but those instances are always with Iroh, and it makes sense that he'd open up to him since they're family. However, the Blue Spirit is the first time we see Zuko feeling truly hopeless. Not angry, not conniving, but hopeless, vulnerable. He laments the fact that Zhao has a much greater chance at capturing the Avatar than him, and that if that happens, he's going to lose everything, showing how deeply he cares for his honor and his nation. This is a scene that wouldn't make sense had you not known Zuko's backstory from the Storm, and considering that these two episodes are back to back, it was clearly the intent that this scene was meant to reference the events of the previous episode. This segues pretty well into my final point for why these two episodes should be considered a two-part episode, because they might have been the last. In case you don't know, when Nickelodeon first picked up Avatar, they only ordered 13 episodes at first, likely to gauge interest in a show like this. As a result, the creators and staff wanted to make sure that if episode 13 was going to be their last, they wanted to make an impact. Obviously, they ended up getting picked up for 7 more episodes and 2 more seasons, but it's my personal belief that the Blue Spirit was made to bait fans into wanting more episodes, and that the only way to do that was with the Storm. Think back to what we've been talking about in this video, that the theme of both of these episodes is that Aang and Zuko aren't as different as they think. And with that in mind, think of the Blue Spirit. It ends with Aang and Zuko both going to sleep, reflecting on the adventure they just had together, with Zuko thinking about what Aang said to him about being friends, and Aang thinking that he was in the wrong by saying that. With their similar backstories and clear will they won't they platonic friendship established in these 2 episodes alone, it's clear that these episodes were made to raise the stakes. Things just got a lot more interesting with these 2 episodes, with one providing context for our protagonist and the other playing with that context, both in ways that emotionally invest the audience to see how this will unfold. It wasn't quite a cliffhanger, but you're still eager to watch the next episode. So to wrap up this video, the Storm and the Blue Spirit work fantastically when treated as a 2-part episode, in that the latter doesn't work if the former didn't provide the necessary context, and that the 2 episodes have the exact same theme of Aang and Zuko being more similar than they realized. But hey, maybe I'm off base here. I'd love to know what you all think down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe so you never miss a video. I've been MattCMG. I'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching.